to go.
Okay. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 9 a.m. on the money. Amber, could you please take attendance?
Sure. Okay. Let's see. So we have John Scott.
Here.
Mike Soltis.
Here.
Ellen McKitterick.
Here.
Okay. Adrian Cochran has not yet joined us, and Holly Williams will not be joining us today. We have a quorum. Thank you, John.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just acknowledge the members of the public that are with us today. Thank you for joining us. Our next item on the agenda is a review and approval of the July 22nd, 2022 meeting minutes. I'll ask the committee to review them and for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the July 22nd meeting minutes.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion for and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Motion passes. So we'll move on to our next item, which is the actuarial quarterly update. John and Harinda and Audrey, would you please provide us with the updates?
Audrey, I'm working on giving you sharing abilities right now, so you should receive that now.
And it'd be, if you could give me.
Harinda, you as well. You're
Okay, perfect. So you should see my screen now.
We can see your screen. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you and good morning to everyone on this committee as well as the public. The purpose of our presentation today is to provide you with a quarterly update. Now, going forward, these quarterly updates will be more meaningful, I'll say. This one specifically is intended to build a bit more of the cadence, show you sort of the results as we would. This time, we did just present results a few, I guess a month ago in July to the same committee. So there's a few updates from those results, but we did actually present actual results. Going forward, it will make a lot more, it will be the results that we present will be a lot more meaningful because we'll be showing actual results relative to a projection. So the comparison will tell us a little bit of the story and what's going on. So with that, I will go to the next page. Our presentation is relatively short today. Okay, so we'll provide you with the key results and talk a little bit about, provide some more detail on the financial results, and then talk a bit about the reserve as well. So the key results are provided in this page. Here provides the updated results. So I guess we'll call it the August 2022 results for the period that ends June 30th, 2022. Next quarter, we'll be presenting results for the period that ends for the first quarter, new fiscal year, July 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2022. The second column provides the results that were previously reported in July of 2022. So those results were intended to be actual as we had it at that point. There were some minor, small changes to the results, but generally no big changes. And then we also have more information on actual contributions received subsequent to June 30th. So that figure has been updated as well in these results. So the first line item here provides the actual contributions earned. You'll see that compared to what was provided in July, that number has decreased a little because the actual contributions that came in during July in respect of the period April through June 2022, that number was a little bit lower. So we reported that. Investment income is unchanged. The incurred claims changed slightly, just as based on slightly newer information. And the expenses changed a little, and we'll talk a bit about that. This was related to some seed funded payments. And so the net activity overall for the period changed from 454.6 to 446.3 million. Okay. And then the fund balance also follows that because we started the fund at 0, so the net activity is equal to the fund balance for this specific period. Okay. The funding metrics are the same as what were provided before, and we had talked about that in a fair amount of detail before. I had not intended on going through this in a lot of detail again because we just spoke about it. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those and go through any of this as well. But generally, all of the funding metrics that we had set up previously are met. And so the fund is in a good position as it stands right now, and that's ultimately the primary results that we wanted to report out. Okay, the following page does have a little bit more detail. I'll point out two things. One, the contributions that we mentioned. So the contributions for fiscal year 2022, so for the period that ends June 30th, there is this grace period. That's about a month after that where the contributions can be received. So in July of 2022, what was initially what we had was 113 million. Actual came in at 105 million, so quite a bit lower. There's a big decrease in Q2 relative to Q1. And we have a lot of information, a lot of hypothesis around what's driving that. And going forward, we'll be able to report on a quarterly basis what this number looks like. A couple things I wanted to point out was the reporting that has been put into place this year. So going forward is a lot better. And so we'll be able to get a lot of detail and dig into what's driving changes in this number with the new reporting. Unfortunately, we don't have that yet. It's kind of a work in progress. But we anticipate going forward, we'll be able to look at the contributions and really dive into what are the key drivers behind it. So I just want to point that out, that's one change, that's the primary change there. And then the second change is related to the seed capital payments. So that that number was changed from 3.8 million to 3.2 million. So we just want to point that out as well. Other than that, the numbers were more or less the same as what was reported previously. Okay. We've shown the same numbers in a graphical format. This again, not as useful this time around, but as we are monitoring the information on a quarterly basis, the graphic will be very helpful to see the quarterly results. But we thought we'd put it in here just to set the cadence for the future reporting as well. Overall, though, just so since we're looking at it, we have revenue and we have the updated results shown here. So we have revenue, the spending, and then the net closing balance, which is the difference between the revenue and the spending. And so on the left, we have the updated results. On the right-hand side, we have the results that were previously reported. Okay. The reserve estimate as of June 30th, we had talked about that previously as well. That number has not changed, so we have not done a new calculation to come up with a reserve estimate that was presented previously as of June 30th. So this number is 40 million. We have gone through, there are three components: a case reserve component, so reserve in respect of open claims with outstanding payments, a pending claims reserve, so these are claims that have not yet been adjudicated, and some of a big chunk of those will be approved, but we just don't know which ones, so we've estimated a reserve for those. And then the last item is the incurred but not reported claims, so claims that that have happened prior to June 30th, but that we haven't received any formal submission to make those claims. So then that reserve is 7 million. So a total of 40 million in respect of the reserves as of June 30th, 2022. Okay. So those were the primary things we wanted to talk about. The main results being these results here. And I did want to open it up for questions.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, thank you both for your presentation today.
Thank you.
All right, Dave, it looks like you're up. Time for our budget review and spending to date.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen.
We can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you. Okay, so before I go into the results for July, our financial statements are in a slightly different format. We, as you might remember, we use QuickBooks for our reporting needs. So we are actively using it more for reporting now and are using reports that emanate from there. The information isn't that much different. The expense categories are pretty much the same. The information that we show in column format's also the same, just looks slightly different, but we have actual activity in the first column, and then the second column is the budget activity. The third column shows the variance between the two. A positive variance means it's better than budget, and a negative variance means it's less than budget. So we'll be going over the results for July today. July is the beginning of the fiscal year. So we'll just be showing month-to-date results. We won't be showing year-to-date results yet because they would be the same number. We also, in the last few months, we've also shown projections compared to budget, but since it's the very, very beginning of the fiscal year, we don't have enough information yet to say that anything would be materially different than budget. In the coming months, we will begin showing that again. So that's a little background on the reports, but let's get right down to the information in the reports. So for the month of July, the spending for the authority was $836,000. That's predominantly made up of two items. It's made up of salaries and related expenses, which was $742,000. That's about a third higher than a typical month, but that's because July is one of the 2 months in the year when we have 3 pay periods instead of 2 pay periods. So that's why it's higher than usual. We also had some previously approved lump sum payments by the board that were in there for July that were consistent with the lump sum payments given out statewide. That's compared, the $136,000 is compared to a budget of $2.2 million. So we're ahead of budget by $1.4 million out the gate. The one thing I did want to point out is that insurance expense for the month was worse than budget. That's due to a timing difference. We had expected to pay the insurance premiums all in June. It didn't turn out that way. We paid some of them in June and we paid the remainder in July. So we expect that timing to go forward. So we'll never pay more than an annual premium in any one fiscal year. So by the end of this fiscal year, the insurance expense is expected to be on or close to the annual budget for the year. Moving on to our bond activity. Our bond activity was just under $17,000 for the month. We are using that money for our claims integration project, which is just starting to get underway. Again, we're ahead of budget by over $600,000. So more to come on that as some more of the projects start to get underway during the fiscal year. I want to show you another bond schedule. For those of you who have been to the meeting before, you may remember I had a bond schedule with several columns that listed all the various bond projects that the authority was authorized for. That's still on this schedule. It's just in rows now instead of columns. So if you've heard me talk about this before, you've heard me mention that we have $50 million of bonds authorized and we have $16 million of bonds allocated. Those numbers haven't changed. And to date, we've spent $11.2 million of those bonds on the various projects with $4.8 million left for bonds money to be spending on. Over the coming months, we expect to spend it on claim integration and security. As I mentioned, we'll also starting to spend some money on fund recovery, and the website redesign will also be underway in the coming months. Moving on to our contribution activity. Our contribution amount for July included all the contributions that were due for June. Most people like to pay during the following month where they have a grace period. So we got $104.7 million in contributions. That is somewhat less than we have budgeted for at $6.5 million. But we'll get to that in a second. So we are monitoring that and we're taking a close look on that. But on the whole, we're still ahead of budget because of a few other reasons. So number one is our investment income. As you see, our investment income was $495,000. That's compared to a budget of $22,000. So at the time of budgeting, we had budgeted at the rate we were earning, which was 0.1%. Interest rates had just started going up around that time, but we weren't sure what was going to happen in that environment. So we weren't ready to take any kind of aggressive stance in terms of interest. But the interest rate has gone up. For the month of July, the short-term investment fund account that most of the money is invested in earned a rate north of 1.6%. So that's why the variance is what it is. Also, the benefit claims for the month were at about $20.2 million. That's been the run rate for the past few months. We've been around the neighborhood of $20 million. So we think at the rate we're going, it'll be that way. Actually, it'll probably be a little higher. Looks like there was a slight pickup in the month of August from what we've seen so far. But the benefit claims amount will still be in the low 20s, we think, for the month of August, below budget. So we were ahead of budget by $17 million for benefits claimed. So while contributions did come in less than expected, benefits paid out were also less than budgeted. So on the whole, we were ahead of the budget for the month by just about $11.4 million for net activity of about $77.8 million for the month. So where does that put the contribution fund at the end of the month? It puts it at $460.9 million. That's the balance of the fund at the end of July. So to date, contributions coming in have been $623.4 million through the end of July, and benefits paid out have been $122.9 million. Everything else is as expected. The benefit admin fee is what we normally pay, about less than $1.9 million a month. The administration fee was as is budgeted. And the seed repayment is still being paid monthly at $318,000 and will be paid that through October. Those are our financial results for the month. Does anybody have any questions?
Dave, I have a question.
Yes, Mike.
So the $6.5 million in contributions that we came up a little short.
Yes.
We have any analysis of why we came up short? I mean, my bigger question is, I've been reading about projections for layoffs nationwide. We're either in a recession or maybe heading into a recession, depending on who you listen to.
Okay.
But when I read about anticipated widespread layoffs, I think about our contribution number.
Right.
I'm wondering if that $6.5 million, is it all related to the shrinkage of the workforce?
We haven't done any in-depth analysis of the numbers yet, as we just got them. The budget was based on the assumptions that we got from the actuaries back then, which does include a certain rate of employment and a certain rate of increase and things like that. So I think it's a little early to say if there's any shrinkage in the workforce as of yet. Certainly we'll be monitoring it, and if there's any cause for concern or anything like that, we'll certainly let everyone know. Again, there's always two factors to how the
He looks frozen.
It's
It's not just you. He's frozen.
About a mid-sentence there.
So let's see if he comes back. So Mike, there's also a couple of things, and forgive me because I'm getting over COVID myself, so I kind of sound froggy a little bit. So there's a couple of things too. One of which is that, as the program progresses, we're trying to figure out if we should just have, sort of a regular quarterly division of how our contributions come in, or if there should be more of a variance depending on what time of the year it is. And it's hard for us to determine that right now, because usually in the beginning of the year, we see higher levels of contribution because people are getting their bonuses. People are usually starting new jobs in the beginning of the year. And then people have not yet hit their Social Security contribution limit. And then as the year progresses, you start to see the numbers go down. What's a little puzzling to us is the precipitous drop that we saw. That's the piece, because we usually don't see it go down by 6 million. And so we're trying to figure out exactly what's driving that. It could be that, there's still some talk that the Great Resignation is still happening. We're not really sure. It's one of the things that our actuaries are also helping us to try to figure out. They're not necessarily seeing it every other state. Some states are also seeing some changes, but a lot of states don't have the same kind of funding model that we do either. So we don't have an exact answer. We have some things that we think might be causing it. But we're also thinking that we probably just want to adjust our budget expectations so that it's different for different quarters, because we know the conditions change.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
and feel better. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
But one issue with, they mentioned monitoring, and Ellen's on the phone here. Welcome, Ellen. Just to make sure everybody's aware, any employer who's anticipating significant layoffs has to provide 60 days notice, at least most times. And those notices go to the Department of Labor. So if we monitor those, we'll at least it's not perfect for reasons we don't have to get into, but at least we'll have a sense of any significant employers who are reducing their workforce by monitoring those.
Mike, I apologized. My internet dropped. I wasn't avoiding your question or anything like that.
That's fine. Andrea filled in seamlessly for you.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. I appreciate that. But if there's any follow-up I need to do, please let me know.
Any other questions? I do have one question. If you're using QuickBooks, does being what we are, the profit and loss statement and the balance sheet make sense to look at as part of these reports?
We can certainly provide. We could certainly provide that information to you going forward.
I know how to read them that way. So
okay.
Just interesting to see how they look.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah, we can start providing that next month. You got it. No problem.
Any other questions? Dave, thank you. And Andrea, thank you. I hope you feel better. Gee whiz, you sound like you had a rough case of it there. All right, so next up is John Simonetti for an update on our claims administration. John?
Good morning, everyone. Just going to share my screen here. We can take a look at the claims activity.
We can see your screen, John.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so claims are through August 22nd. So total claims filed through August 22nd, 65,300. August claims in through the 22nd, 5,717. And looking at received status, all approved claims at 34,774, and the approval rate is at 53%. Denied claims at 20,346 with a 31% denial rate. Pending claims are down to 9% of the total and relatively low at 5,934. And then those statistics, when we remove the COVID claims and the associated approved, denied, and pending claims with regard to the COVID claims that have come in, you can see the approval rates then change a bit here. Looking at the total number of approved claims, 33,957, rising to 57% once those COVID claims are removed, and denied claims, 15,756, and that percentage is 26%. And then claims by reason, still the same trends that we're seeing here. Employees' own illness or injury is the leading item here, and same thing goes for August as well, and bonding and pregnancy also significant components of the leave reasons, and followed by care for a family member, and then the other associated leave reasons that are substantially lower here. And you can see those associated numbers as well for August, relatively low numbers so far in August with regard to those other categories. And then moving through to the demographics, claims by age group, the 26 to 41 is outpacing the rest by a wide margin, followed by the 42 to 57 and the 58 to 76. And then again, we see the same trends here where female claims, as compared to male claims, it's over a 2-to-1 ratio still, and that's holding pretty steady also. And these are all cumulative from the beginning of the program. And then a little bit further analysis, claims by both age group and leave reason. And again, you can see that the 26 to 41 age group is by far the largest, and followed by the 42 to 57 age group, and the associated own injury and illness is the largest category there, and followed by pregnancy, childbirth, and bonding in those age groups as well. And leave reason by gender, and own injury illness is outpacing the other categories there, and pregnancy and bonding again being the next largest share of that. And once again, with regard to the type of leave, continuous, intermittent, or reduced, continuous by far outpacing the rest of the group, followed by intermittent, and then reduced schedule is very low numbers as well. And then these are the same statistics that we saw. We only compiled these monthly, so these are the mix of towns that have the highest utilization rate when we look at it by population. And again, the mix of both rural, suburban, and some urban areas as well. And then the approved to date by leave reason. So employees' own illness is the largest category, and the bonding and pregnancy are the next two largest categories, followed by care of a family member. And then when you add the pregnancy and bonding piece together, that becomes a very large portion of the caseload as well, which is running at, these are on approved claims, and that's running at about 47% when you add the bonding and pregnancy together, which has been pretty consistent as well. And here's the monthly claims customer care center data, and that is through July. We should have new numbers on that at the end of the month to add to the trend analysis here. And you can see some of the other statistics associated with it, both the call volume, number of calls answered in 30 seconds, number of calls abandoned, and then the hold times and average handle time as well. And with regard to payments, we've had almost 250,000 payments released, and to 27,000 plus unique employees, covering almost 1.5 million total days paid and a total gross payment amount of over 145 million. And the payment types have been consistent as well. Almost 90%, about 89% opting for direct deposit versus the debit card, which is at 11%. And then you can see some of these other statistics here on the average daily payment amount and the percentages associated with the max weekly benefit rate. We did have that change in the maximum benefit rate related to the increase in minimum wage. And so there have been some increases in the amounts of payments that we've seen related to that change in the minimum wage and the associated change in the maximum benefit rate going to $840. So some of those numbers are starting to come through at this point as well. Okay, and that concludes the claims presentation.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions for John?
I have a question for John. Good
Sure.
morning, John.
Good morning.
Can you go back to one of the early slides where you had the percents of approved and denied?
Sure.
Okay, so if we look at the excluding the 5,400 COVID claims, the percents add up to 83, and I presume the rest are pending claims?
They're pending, and there are a couple of other smaller categories in there as well, which we could certainly provide you the details on that, some of which are very low numbers and kind of aggregate to maybe a total of 3% or so. But yes, that is where those are.
So if we look at just the claims where there was a decision already made, not pending, it looks that about 2/3 of those decisions are approvals. 34,000 out of 49,000, right?
Yes.
So of the denied claims, and I know we've talked about this from time to time, some of them are because a failure to follow up. You know, they follow a claim and then they don't produce medical documentation in support of it. Do we have any sense of what percent of the denied claims are due to the claimant's failure to follow up?
So currently that percentage is quite high. It's about 79% of files that are denied for lack of paperwork having been submitted. And we are certainly actively working on ways to provide better messaging to claimants about the necessity of providing those details, et cetera. And then some of them are folks that file and potentially abandon those claims as well. A little bit harder to measure those. And the other piece of the puzzle that we're actively looking at as well, which we've been talking to AFLAC about getting some better reporting on, is the numbers of claims that go to reconsideration from having been denied, and then what the percentage of approvals on reconsideration is as well. And as I said, we're actively working towards obtaining some better insight and reporting on those details as well, which we hope to share with you as soon as they become available.
Like there's another category that's growing that you should also know about, and this is the category of claims that employers are requiring employees to file and then have their claim denied so that they can get access to their employer benefit. And we're seeing this grow pretty steadily and with large employers so that they can engage in the benefit coordination with their short-term disability or any other kind of policy that they offer. So we've had some discussion with some large employers, and it's essentially been, please don't do that, because it just, you're really just submitting claims that we know we can't do anything with and using resources that we really need to to process claims for people who are really entitled. They know that they may have a true entitlement to the benefit. You're having your people apply, knowing that they probably will not qualify, and because they will have almost some or all of their time paid for by their employer. And that's one of the reasons why, because you can't receive, more than 100% of your pay through here. So they'll get them to apply, they'll get a denial, they'll take the denial, and then the denial is the next step for the person to access their benefit. And we just see that number continuing to grow. So we're talking to some of the large employers to say, if there's an alternative to that, then let's talk about that. Maybe we can just tell you generally, if you've got employees in these income categories, don't even have them apply. But that's beginning to be a problem too. So John, I just wanted to mention that because we have more and more of that we're continuing to contend with some of the state's largest employers too.
Interesting. So if we go back to, John, of those denied claims, 79%, let's say 80%, are for failure to provide the necessary information. And we take those out of the 15,000. That says to me that substantively, we've denied about 3,000 claims. Once we got to the merits of them, we only denied 3,000, which we've approved 34 and denied 3. That's an overwhelming approval rate, which is what I would expect, right?
That is true.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's a helpful perspective.
Good, thank you.
I have a follow-up. Is it possible to rephrase the denied claims statement as Mike was asking about, failure to provide necessary paperwork and then denied? Because that's an important statistic. If the public is looking at this, so they just a third or 26% of claims are being denied. Well, let's put it out there that people just aren't getting the paperwork to us.
Sure, we could certainly look into that perspective with regard to this program. And I think sometimes the consumer perspective with government programs in general is that they may not necessarily grasp the reality of the required paperwork in order to obtain an approval. And I think that does happen in some cases. We've been actively working, as I mentioned, on better messaging associated with that so that they have a better understanding of what's required in order to get there. But yes, I agree with you that that would be a helpful distinction.
Some politician's going to grab that 26% and make noise about it.
Yeah, I understand. I think with that said, though, that Jessica and her team have been engaging in a very, I would say, aggressive social media campaign and radio campaign to let people know that you can't just submit, and I'm simplifying it, your driver's license or your social security documents, which we don't ask for. People send us all kinds of things. Their immigration papers. We've seen just things you can't even imagine. The people send us and to be very specific about what you need. So we have seen a slow but steady improvement in people really understanding what it is that they need to submit. But we're also sensitive to the fact that by the time you file a claim for paid leave, you're sometimes in a bit of a crisis in your family, so you're not always thinking clearly about what needs to get done. And we also find that people file things simultaneously. So they're filing at work, they're filing for paid leave, they're filing for unemployment, they're filing for workers' compensation. All those things have different requirements, and sometimes they send us stuff that is supposed to go to workers' comp, and it comes to us. So it's still like on a case-by-case basis that we still try to figure this out. So but we see it getting better. And we also have been really pushing AFLAC to say, don't just deny. What we really want, we want you to do the heavy lifting and go back to people and say, this is what you're missing. Don't just send a letter because you only have 3 of the 5 documents that you need. Their deadline is passed, and so you're going to deny them because, quite frankly, that just makes people angry, and it's not good customer service. So John and his team have really worked very hard to really make sure AFLAC is better focused on what they need to do to have more consistent communication with people so that they know they need and that they can get their claim approved. And if they can't provide it, then at least they know, and that their denial doesn't come as a surprise, and to give them more opportunity to comply with it. So with that said, John and Aaron and Kathy and I are going to Aflac in 2 weeks to spend some quality time there, so we can just get a better understanding of seeing the operation ourselves, because no one's really been there for a while, and to have some more in-depth conversation with the vendor. As we meet with, I know, I can't even imagine. I know how much time I spend. I can't even imagine how much time John spends. But this will be helpful, I think, to be in the same room with them to get this message across more consistently.
Absolutely. And as Andrea mentioned as well, our internal team additionally provides customer support for assisting customers with curing deficiencies in their paperwork and actively doing that on an ongoing basis as necessary when anybody presents with issues that way, whether it be dealing with an employer or whether it be dealing directly with the customer to assist in assistance in getting those documents so that they understand what's required and getting them uploaded into the Aflac system and then expedited for processing if there have been delays, et cetera. So we're actively doing that on an ongoing basis and certainly have helped assist in many instances that way to resolve claims for individual customers.
Just a piece of feedback, and it was, you know, my husband had in full disclosure, my husband had a paid leave claim several months ago, so I was aware of kind of some of the processes. And then subsequently, I got some feedback from a local senator whose constituent was frustrated that they filed a claim and hadn't heard from Connecticut Paid Leave. And my feedback was, go look at your mail for Aflac paperwork, because that's where it comes from. And that's what they had. They thought that was junk mail from Aflac. So maybe some feedback is that the envelopes need to say Connecticut Paid Leave on it, or at least more prominently, because they're expecting it to come from Connecticut Paid Leave, not from Aflac.
Okay, we appreciate that feedback. We'll certainly take that back to Aflac for discussion.
Any other questions for John?
I have a question, John, and I don't know if you guys have data on this, but you said on one of the slides, I can't remember which one, that continuous leave requests were, you know, the vast majority bulk of the requests that you're receiving.
Correct.
Do you have any data on the length of requests that are being approved? Are people, for example, filing requests for the full 12 weeks of leave? Do you see people filing requests for shorter periods of time, and what the approval rates on those would be?
We do have some duration data. Let me just take a peek at the end here. So you can see that's not on this particular report. But I can certainly provide some of that information for you. We do have duration. We could take a look at the duration breakdown or look for some additional reporting with respect to the different categories of duration, but we do have some of that internally, which has not been produced on this particular reporting, but we could certainly share some of that with you.
Yeah, I'd be very
So-
curious to see it. Thank you.
Helen, on average, people are taking between 5.7 and 6.2 weeks of leave.
Okay.
The bonding leaves and the parental leaves tend to be a bit longer,
Mhm.
but the law, as you know, because you work at DOL, right? The law changed. And so, you know, you get 12 weeks in a 12-month period. So we find people are taking, especially for employees own illness, they're taking shorter durations of leave, because you have to wait another 12 months before you get that other 12-week time period. So it's not that long. We don't see a lot of people exhaust their entire 12 weeks.
Mhm.
Some do. And it's going to be a long wait until they can have, unless they have an employer benefit to supplement that. That's generally the average.
Okay.
Okay.
That's great, Andrea. Thank you.
Well, that
Mike, you're on mute.
so just following up on that, that if somebody has exhausted their 12 weeks, that would be another, excuse me, non-substantive reason for a denial, right?
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so that goes to that number again of percent of denials. All right, good.
Does. And
Thank you.
likely as we get later in the year, you might see more of that, but currently those numbers are relatively low.
Any other questions? So you're hearing none. John, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
We're on to old business. Is there any old business that we need to discuss?
I have a couple of items for old business, John.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Both are audit related. So the first item relates to our audit of our financial statements, which happens annually by Markham. That is underway. That's underway. And so, and then the normal timing was expected that we would present, that the auditors would present the financials in September. As a quasi, we get certain outside information related to our pension and OPEB, which stands for other post-employment benefits, because we have to expense our share for our staff of that expense and that liability. We get that information from outside agencies. We have the pension information, but the OPEB information is running about 2 months behind where it was last year. So, so instead of presenting in September, we expect to wrap it up and present the financials in November. Our deadline for the financial statements to the Office of the State Comptroller was in early October. They understood the situation because it wasn't just the authority that was affected by this, it was other quasis and in fact other state agencies for that matter. So they were very gracious and gave us a 2-month extension for audited financials. So we'll still be compliant that way. So I just want to let everybody know that presentation will most likely be happening in November instead of September next month. Having said that, we're not delaying the whole audit 2 months. We're still doing everything else like it was going to be in September. So by the time the OPEB numbers come around, that will be the last piece of the puzzle. Our auditors will take a look at that, audit those, plug them in. We'll look at everything at a whole, and then we'll finalize the financials at that time. That was item number one. Number two was related to the audit from the Auditors of Public Accounts, APA. As Andrea mentioned at the board meeting last week, we were notified at the tail end of July, I think a few days after the last Finance Committee meeting, that they were going to begin their periodic audit of the authority. We had an initial meeting with them. They had an information request. We sent it to them. They asked us for more information at the meeting. We sent that to them too. I think they were quite happy that we sent everything in such a timely manner. So they're examining everything now. I'm sure they'll have some questions and some follow-ups and things like that. But that's where we are with that audit as it progresses. And we have anything else to report, we'll certainly let everybody know. But that audit's underway as well. That's all I have, John. Thank you. Anyone have any questions on those?
Dave, just one quick question. How does the APA audit compare to the Markham audit?
So two things. Number one, the APA audit is for fiscal years ended 2020 and 2021. So they're a year behind. The Markham audit is for fiscal year ended June 2022. So that's number one. Number two is the APA audit is has more of a focus on the internal controls of the organization and not just those related to finance. Whereas the Markham audit audits our financial statements and they offer an opinion that they're not materially misstated in any way. So that's the difference. Markham is really on the financial statements of the organization, and APA is more so on the internal controls of the organization.
Got it. Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Anybody have any questions? Dave, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other
Thank
old
you.
business?
No,
Well, I'm asking the group, is there any other old business?
none for me.
Okay. Hearing that, none. Is there any new business?
I have one piece of new business, and that is that we have posted for a position in John's unit, which will be a person, we hope to get a person who has a really strong insurance background, who will be the agency's official liaison between us and AFLAC, someone who has a lot of expertise in claims administration and a lot more detail in how that process works. So we all do. This is the issue. I have some, John has some, Aaron has some, but what we're really looking for is a subject matter expert, someone who actually has worked in an insurance company, who can then help us to hold AFLAC even more accountable for the outcomes than right now. So we've posted that. That closes on the 9th, I believe, September, and then we'll look to see who we can get. So we think that we've learned enough in the period of time that we've worked with them that we knew what we needed. We knew we needed this before, but we really needed to better understand what kind of expertise we were looking for. And I think we know that now. And so we will be bringing that person on hopefully by the end of the year, because it takes a while to hire.
Any questions for Andrea on that subject? Very good, thank you. Any other new business? May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Or a second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 9:52 a.m. Thank you all very much for coming today. Andrea, feel better, gosh.
Yeah.
You look tired.
It's been a rough week.
I can imagine. Well, you take good care of yourself and feel better.
Yeah.
And meeting's adjourned, so we'll see you all soon.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, everyone, have a nice weekend.